It doesn't. Listen.
Coming to you from our studios in New York City, the WESU Radio Network brings you an old-time radio play. My name is Jeff Schnabel, chair of ESU's Region 6 branches, and I want to welcome everyone who has tuned in tonight to hear an original ESU Centennial radio play mystery comedy. This special event is part of ESU's ongoing Centennial celebrations that will continue into 2021 and beyond. Our hosts for tonight's radio play are the Region 6 branches: Cincinnati, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Kentucky, and St. Louis. At the end of our radio play, we'll have some time for Q&A for our actors and director. So just type your question using the Q&A button below. Tonight, we're bringing you a mystery comedy called The Case of the Missing Parents. Now, put on your flannel PJs and your bunny slippers, let the dog out, close your eyes, sit back and sip your favorite cup of tea or joe, and gather around the radio. Our radio play mystery comedy begins now.
It doesn't. Listen.
Man, it's hot. It's about the only thing I had energy to say out loud as I ran my fingers through the thick shock of blonde hair on my head. I was sitting in front of the broken air conditioner stuffed haphazardly into my second-floor office window. The upper half of the window had the stick-on letters slowly peeling in the unusual heat of a Kansas City October. They announced to the world that these were the offices of Brickhouse and Associates. Outside, the streets of Midtown baked in an afternoon sun that was hotter than a gas grill with both jets stuck on high. In fact, the only thing that kept the cool breeze from giving the town some relief was its complete and total absence. As I flexed my shoulders and admired myself in the nearby mirror, I reflected on the events of my career, as well as my deep blue eyes and winning smile. Okay, so maybe I actually looked more like a seedy version of Humphrey Bogart, but I had to find some illusion of adequacy right now. There on my desk was a certified mail envelope and the eviction notice that had recently been inside. They looked back at me like a wife holding her overdrawn checkbook for her husband to see. In other words, they accused me of failure, an accusation that was all too accurate. I sighed deeply like a bald tire losing the last bit of air. All gone. I moaned like a ghost who just had a wrecking ball pass through its body on the way to demolish its haunted house. All gone.
What's gone, Dirk?
Said the voice on the other side of the partition. I looked up in time to see my No, I had to get used to the new job description. I looked up in time to see my investigations associate come around the corner. Libby Stackwell lived up to her every politically incorrect interpretation of her all-too-descriptive name. I stared as I tried to remind myself that my behavior was sexist, inappropriate, and completely aimed at objectifying the girl who was at the center of my gaze. I also noted that in the script the previous sentence lacked an Oxford comma after inappropriate. That gave me a bit of vengeful pleasure as I thought of my sophomore English teacher, Mrs. Davis. She insisted on that grammatical excess, and more than once had filled my papers with evil blood-red marks because of my stubborn punctuational resistance. Miss Stackwell, I was just reflecting, as I glanced again in the mirror, that our days in business may be threatened,
Oh, no.
she said in a voice that could out-silk silk.
What makes you say that?
As she walked toward me, I tried unsuccessfully to avoid looking at her T-shirt, printed with the particularly appropriate words, "My eyes are up here, buddy." Oddly enough, the next words out of her mouth were,
My eyes are up here, buddy. Dirk, seriously, are we going to have to get you back into that sexism resistance training class again?
I tore my eyes away from the now off-limits visual in front of me and concentrated once again on the pavement outside. A little kid listlessly threw a stick for a small dog to fetch. The dog shrugged and doggedly refused to give chase. "I'm sorry, Miss Stackwell. I'll be happy to enroll in the class for the 4th time, but we have bigger problems right now. Look." I handed her the letter. She took it in with one comprehensive Evelyn Wood-inspired glance.
Oh, no.
She gasped. "Oh, yes," I re-gasped.
Well, what will we do?
She gasped in response to my re-gasp. "I don't know," I whispered, hoping to catch my breath after all that gasping. "They're going to kick us out within the week."
Oh, please, Dirk. You have to think of something.
She whispered back in a voice that opened bedroom doors for 3 city blocks. "I can't think," I said, distracted by the description of her whisper. "Thinking is a skill I definitely lack while I go into shock,"
It's unbelievable.
gasped Miss Stackwell. "I know," I stated, firmly, avoiding the temptation to begin another gasping session. I hoped that Miss Stackwell had experienced her last gasp. "If something doesn't happen very soon, we'll be out on the sidewalk trying to convince that dog to chase one of my embossed rulers. By the way, do you want a couple to take home with you?" I opened the first of 10 large boxes stacked by the wall.
No, Dirk.
She said in a decidedly non-gasping voice.
I took a box to just about every school in town last week. Whatever possessed you to order 3 dozen boxes of rulers anyway?
"I don't know. I just thought I'd inch my way forward until I got my foot in the door of paying clients."
Dirk, I think you have to face the fact that you just didn't measure up to a career as a detective.
I thought bitterly about how I hated it when she came up with a better pun than I did. "I know, Miss Stackwell, I know. The water meter of my time as a private eye is about to grind to a halt." Even as I said it, I realized that only a charitable person would view that statement as the least bit witty or evocative.
Dirk, that was not the least bit witty or evocative.
Said Miss Stackwell in a clearly uncharitable tone. I marveled at the accuracy of her literary criticism and clear grasp of the state of my affairs, but became confused and flustered when I thought of the other meaning of affairs.
Dirk, you look confused and flustered.
Purred Miss Stackwell, gently patting my hand with hers. "I'm sorry if I do," I admitted. "But listening to your excellent analysis of my substandard verbiage has made me realize something very important."
Something like how much you need me and that I should get a raise in salary?
She suggested in a low and suggestive tone. "Yes, exactly that," I lied while desperately trying to remember the admonition on her T-shirt.
Dirk, my eyes are up.
Okay, wait. That's not what I meant at all. I meant that if a client doesn't come through that door right now saying she needs my help, or else her goose is cooked. Well then, our geese, will be cooked, indeed. At that moment, the door to the office burst open, and in strode a flustered and seemingly distraught young woman. She spoke quickly and without a trace of irony.
I need your help, or my goose is cooked.
Libby Stackwell and I exchanged glances, both of which were properly focused on the eyes of the other person for once. We turned our attention back to the prim young woman as she suddenly dissolved into tears that threatened to stain her eggshell white skirt, navy blue blazer, and lavender blouse beneath it. I marveled at the fact I noticed these minor details, and that I had once again avoided an Oxford comma. Take that, Mrs. Davis. Libby swung immediately into action, offering a full box of Puff's tissues to the nearly hysterical creature in front of us.
Now, you stop that right now. Just sit down and tell us all about the goose that you don't want to have cooked.
The young woman took a tissue and blew her nose with a sound that would have made a goose sit up and take notice, even if it were cooked. I know just what might help. How about some gin? The young woman sank into the old lumpy couch along the wall.
No, thanks. I hate card games.
Trying to hide an irritated look back at the young woman, I gave up on the idea of fetching a drink for the two of them and, more importantly, me.
Well, I'll let you two get down to it. I have plenty of work to do, trying to make it look like I have work to do. Is there anything else I can get you, miss?
She paused, hinting broadly that the author had waited far too long to give the young woman a name.
Bradley. Myra Bradley. No, I'm fine. Thanks.
Well, Myra, I'll be right back with the bill. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean contract, specifying what service we provide and how much, or rather, how we conduct an investigation.
She smiled weakly as I tried to wave her off with not quite the same desperation of an aircraft carrier flight deck officer signaling a rapidly descending wobbly F-15 with a full bomb load. She turned and disappeared behind the partition. Meanwhile, convinced that I was on the wrong side of the partition, I regarded Myra with a long and thoughtful look. I wonder what I'm going to have for dinner, I thought. Something simple and light. And then maybe I'll head out to the park and watch a ball game. That always relaxes me. And I need to be relaxed if this Myra is going to dump a tough case. Speaking of cases, I better replace that bookcase I broke last week. Myra broke in on my thoughtfulness.
You probably have 1,000 things on your mind right now, Mr. Brickhouse, but I need your attention. What do you know about 100th anniversaries?
Well, about the only thing I know is that if you got married when you were 2 years old, you might have a 10% chance of celebrating one.
Mr. Brickhouse, I'm not talking about a wedding anniversary. I'm talking about a celebration of a famous event in history.
Oh, I answered, the balloon of my ego slowly deflating.
Why are you making that strange whistling sound, Mr. Brickhouse? I asked you a question.
I waited for the whistle to subside. Well, I know the 100th is a special occasion and people might want to celebrate.
Yes, that's correct. Do you know of any anniversaries that are being celebrated right now?
I felt like I was back in the 4th grade in the crosshairs of Mrs. Guntweiler again. She had that maddening habit of never giving an answer, but instead interrogating you until you arrived at it yourself, or were carted off to the counselors for mental health treatment. Why are you asking me these questions?
I'm sorry, Mr. Brickhouse. Just an old teacher trick to help a student find the answer himself. I used it many times before I became a lawyer.
I've encountered it many times before, too, I muttered, trying desperately to erase the memory from my mind.
Well, here's the real problem. My parents disappeared 4 days ago. I haven't heard anything from them. I've gone to the police, but they just said maybe they wanted to go off and do their own thing for a while. But that's not like them.
I shook off my disappointment. I had hoped for a different kind of challenge, not another missing parents case. My last one had turned out to be exceptionally simple to solve after I sent Libby, to snoop around the parents' home. They had immediately answered the door when she rang the bell. It turned out that they just did not want to see their nagging daughter and would hide in the storm cellar whenever she came over. "Have you gone to their home? Searched the house? Every room?" I asked hopefully.
Yes, I have. And then I found this.
She withdrew a postcard from her purse with a melodramatic flourish. "What is that?" I asked with an equally melodramatic but fairly pointless flourish.
It's a postcard.
"Well, I can see that. And what does it say?" I was beginning to like this game, although the music was starting to give me a headache.
Dearest Myra, we are attending a most glorious celebration. How perfectly marvelous it is to be able to mark this 100th anniversary. We are so looking forward to seeing our friends from Cincinnati, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Kentucky, and St. Louis. Mumsy and Pupsy.
My disappointment was audible as I reached for the card. "May I see it?"
I hear the disappointment in your voice, Mr. Brickhouse,
said Myra as she handed the card to me. "Oh, sorry. No, it's just, well, my breakfast didn't agree with me."
I see.
"Yeah, I wanted it to be delicious, and it stubbornly refused to be." I imagined a mental rim shot to follow the punchline of the joke. It was completely lost on my client.
Well, that aside, Mr. Brickhouse, will you take the case to find my parents?
I once again conceded sense of humor defeat as I said, "Yes, I'll help you find them,"
Thank you.
said the straight-faced young woman across from me. At that moment, Libby returned to my side with the papers for Myra to sign. She spoke up in her best impression of an efficient assistant.
Now, Miss Bradley, our standard fee is $2,500, and I just need you to initial and sign these papers for us. It's just a formality to be sure we have a clear understanding of the fiduciary and pecuniary responsibilities of respondent
And she went
plaintiff
on
and-
with a well-rehearsed and completely nonsensical recitation that she reserved for clients who seemed to be more than a little naive about such things.
Miss, I'm sorry, your name is?
Stackwell, Libby Stackwell.
Yes. Well, Miss Libby, I'm afraid you mistake me for someone who seems to be more than a little naive about such things. However, being an attorney myself, I can figure out these papers and their contents quite easily.
There followed a scene that would have made the Marx Brothers' party of the first part routine look mild, as Myra and Libby haggled and argued over the contract as presented. I knew better than to interfere and busied myself at shuffling papers from one part of the desk to another, and then back again in a vain attempt to look busy and unconcerned. I decided to try to break the ice of an increasingly cold exchange between the two of them. "Hey, did you hear about the oxymoron that walked into a bar?" They both stopped and stared at me. "Yeah, the silence was deafening," as was the momentary silence that followed my attempt at humor. Surprisingly, Myra responded with,
A non sequitur walks into a bar. In a strong wind, even turkeys can fly.
Not to be outdone, Libby immediately responded,
Papyrus and Comic Sans walk into a bar. The bartender says, "Get out, we don't serve your type."
Oh, yeah? Well, a synonym strolls into a tavern.
Myra clearly knew her English grammar. "I can top that. An illusion walks into a bar, despite the fact that alcohol is its Achilles heel."
Not so fast, Mr. Brickhouse. A mixed metaphor walks into a bar, seeing the handwriting on the wall, but hoping to nip it in the bud.
Hyperbole totally rips into this insane bar and absolutely destroys everything.
Falling slowly, softly drifting The chiasmus collapses to the bar floor.
Hey, okay, none of us are going to walk into a bar unless we get this contract signed.
Libby, there's no literary device in that sentence.
I know that, but this delay is as helpful as giving a set of wire coat hangers to a homeless man.
Wow, I think that was a simile and an allusion.
Dirk.
Okay, back to the contract. I was left to muse as to what exactly a chiasmus actually was while the negotiations grew more heated. Eventually, the original 8-page document, containing 19 blanks for initials and 3 signature pages, was whittled down to half a page, which simply read, Myra Bradley hires Dirk Brickhouse and Associates to find her parents for the amount of $237.50 plus expenses. There followed lines for her signature, mine, and for Libby, who signed her witness signature with such frustration that the clear impression of that signature was left on the finish of the desk. I got some more detailed information from Myra, a check for half the fee, and finally escorted her out the front door of the office. I turned to see Libby pulling out the ledgers and starting to work the calculator on her phone at an almost frantic rate of speed. So, here's the money to get me started on her case. What does that make our financial situation now?
Bad.
Bad?
Bad.
How bad?
Bad enough.
How bad is bad enough?
Bad.
I realized that a redundant bad meant a geometric progression of badness was swirling in Libby's mind. Speaking of swirling, can I get you a drink?
No thanks. I have to find the good and the bad of these books.
I was tempted to pour my own drink as well as break open a thesaurus to find a synonym for bad, but we'd had enough literary fun for the afternoon. I resisted both urges. Instead, I went back to my desk and powered up my aging compact computer. I was going to search for events that occurred in 1920. What were Myra's parents celebrating?
We'll be right back after this commercial announcement. Do your conversations sometimes lack polish and interest? Have you ever noticed your friend's eyes glaze over as you try to make a clever statement or salient point? Do you find yourself isolated at cocktail parties with the nagging suspicion that the bartender is only listening to you because he's getting paid to do so? Then you need the Oxford English Dictionary. This complete compendium of the English language not only reveals a plethora of words that make plethora look simply pedestrian, but also delves into the fascinating background of each word. Soon, you too can be engaging in brilliant conversational moments like, yes, I remember the remarkable sound of Coddy Moddies from my excursion to the New Hebrides last year. And you'll remember to then follow up with, and did you realize the term Coddy Moddy was first recorded by John Ray in his seminal work, a collection of English words not generally used, which was published in 1673? Of course, that was volume 1, which was soon followed. Yes, imagine how you'll be the life of the party after a few simple months of perusing the invaluable OED. Now available online as an online subscription for $90, as well as in the classic print edition for the very reasonable purchase price of $1,295. Shipping and handling terms and the loans to cover their cost available on request. Reinforced shelving is not included. And now, we return you to the case of the missing parents part 2. Hundreds of hundreds.
I threw up my hands in frustration. Fortunately, they remained attached to my arms and did not literally leave the premises. I was finding no evidence of an important anniversary or commemoration. In fact, I had just barely gotten past the login screen, and I was afraid that the ancient machine would finally expire in a shower of sparks, a high-pitched R2-D2 whine, and the blue screen of death on the monitor. Miss Libby, I think it's time for me to get moving on this case. Do you have my Rolodex out there?
I told you last month I entered all those contacts onto your phone, Dirk.
Libby sounded more annoyed than a cat chasing a laser pointer. Oh, right, I mumbled as I fished out the phone. After several minutes, I finally succeeded in locating the number I was searching for.
Kansas City Public Library.
The voice on the other end of the line was surprisingly pleasant, and even more surprisingly, live.
How can I help you?
Hello. Is Donald McTavish there? I almost didn't get the request out because I had been so prepared to enter 2 if you don't know your party's extension and would like to access our staff directory.
I'll check and see if Mr. McTavish is available, sir. 1 ringy-dingy. 2 ringy-dingy.
A few seconds passed as I began to ponder the strange coincidence that had led me to contacting my old friend McTavish. I remembered our days together as we both worked at the local Applebee's, took night classes in hospitality and hotel management, and skateboarded on weekends. McTavish had gone on to build his own successful private catering and events planning company, the Skater Caters. He also served as a part-time researcher for the Metropolitan Library System, specializing in events and anniversaries. I had gone on to abject failure at a number of ventures, including what appeared to be my next loss, Brickhouse and Associates.
Hi, this is McTavish. What's up?
I wondered how he could get away with such informality in a place that seemed the antithesis of informal. But of course, this was someone who had worked an angle that meant the library allowed him to use their phones as his private business line as well. Donald, this is Dirk Brickhouse.
Dirk. Hey, a long time, pal. What can I do for you?
McTavish radiated energy like a stainless steel sculpture at the end of the day in Death Valley. I'm on a new case, Donald. Someone's parents are missing, and the only clue she has is a note saying that they are heading to a 100th anniversary celebration. You're the event planner. I wanted to see if you knew of any big celebrations of 100 years going on around town.
Yeah, there's always something going on, Dirk. Celebrations, commemorations, reunions.
I think we can cross off the reunions, Donald.
Ha! Dirk, right on top of things as always. Well, let's see what I have on my calendar, or what's on the competition's calendars.
Donald, you don't mean to tell me you spy on what your competition is doing.
Actually, Dirk, I mean to tell you exactly that, even if my colleagues would rather not admit that they do exactly the same to me.
I looked at the research list that Libby had printed out after a 5-minute Google search on her brand new Dell computer and made a quick decision. So, Donald, I'm going to give you a bunch of 100th anniversaries we found over here. Why don't you tell me if you know of anything going on with them? There was a pause at the other end.
Okay, while you do that, I'll keep scrolling through my dates and events and see if anything really important comes up.
I ignored the not-so-subtle insult. Great, okay. You don't have anything there on Ponzi schemes, do you?
What?
Charles Ponzi, arrested and convicted of running one of the first widespread scams in 1920. He'd recruit investors for a shell company by promising them big payoffs. Then he'd use the money they invested to pay off earlier investors.
And so as long as new people kept investing.
The earlier investors got their payment.
But if Ponzi failed to find new investors.
Then people got nosy about the real structure of the scheme. And bluey, everything blows up in his face. I had rather liked this idea when Libby first explained it to me, several times, slowly, until she told me what happened to Charles Ponzi after the scheme fell apart.
I don't think there are going to be many people who would want to celebrate a guy who commits securities fraud, Dirk.
I considered current events and some of the people I had met over the years. You might be surprised, Donald. Okay, a couple more. Did you know that Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov were both born in 1920? There was a long, silent pause at the other end. I plunged on. Those are two of the most famous science fiction writers of all time. Silence. In fact, Asimov was a trained scientist. More silence. I was beginning to get worried. Yeah, and he wrote a bunch of books and articles about contemporary scientific ideas as well. The silence on the other end continued as though noise had been outlawed. Haven't you heard of Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451? Silence of the Lambs. Or the Martian Chronicles. If silence is golden, then one of us was getting very rich. How about Asimov's Foundation trilogy? The silence was reluctantly broken.
Dirk, even if I had heard of them, which I haven't, who's going to hold a birthday party for two nobodies?
Nobodies? Donald, the articles and books these guys wrote shaped my early years. This time, the silence was broken by an abrupt laugh.
Ha! Well, that explains a lot then, doesn't it, Dirk?
Oh, very funny. Have your little joke. I don't suppose you've heard of anyone celebrating the 100th anniversary of Agatha Christie's first book?
Not only that, but I don't even know who Agatha Christie is.
Perhaps more accurately, was.
And I refer you back to birthday parties for nobodies.
All right, you Philistine. Agatha Christie was perhaps the most famous mystery writer of all time, and her first book was completed and published in 1920. And for your information, the title is The Mysterious Affairs at Styles. Okay, enough of my list. Did you find anything? I could hear pages flipping on the phone.
Okay, let's see. There's something in here about the Toy Museum celebrating Raggedy Andy.
Oh, yeah, I saw that too. 1920, first Raggedy Andy dolls joined Raggedy Ann.
If she was so raggedy, why didn't she find a rich Andy?
I refuse to dignify that question with a response.
Suit yourself. Hey, what about the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum here in town?
What about it?
This is their 100th anniversary, and they have a dinner on the schedule this week.
That's it. I ended the call abruptly and yelled across the office. Miss Libby, I need my car. I was brought back to earth very quickly.
Dirk, the keys are hanging on the hook behind your desk. The car is parked in the City Hall parking lot, second level, southwest corner, and it has just over a half a tank of gas.
How do you know all this, Libby?
I was with you the last time you drove it.
Oh.
In May.
I see.
A block and a half to get a caramel macchiato.
Right. Okay, I'm a wimp and don't like to walk.
And you made me pay for my own vanilla chai.
And I guess we can add cheapskate onto that too. Is there anything else?
The pay here's really lousy.
Oh, now we're getting to it. I'm really a lousy boss too. Anything else?
No, that about covers it. So get your own car and you better have a iced vanilla chai in your hand when you walk back in the door.
I found the car, brushed off the dirt and cobwebs, and got into the driver's seat. I turned the key and heard a grinding sound that began as a long, painfully slow growl, but then sped up to a not quite as long and not quite as painful growl. An hour later, I was sitting in the car outside the museum. I'd had a great conversation with Mr. Kendrick, the president of the museum. Met a bunch of baseball players from the Cleveland Indians. Heard all kinds of fascinating stories about Satchel Paige, Cool Papa Bell, and Josh Gibson. I was wearing a 1942 KC Monarchs cap. I had a bag full of patches from the Indianapolis ABCs, Louisville Blackcaps, Cincinnati Tigers, St. Louis Stars, and Cleveland Buckeyes. I also had a Buck O'Neill bobblehead that sang "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And I had found out that the Bradleys would not be going to a dinner at the Negro Leagues Museum. I called the office.
Rickhouse and Associates, what do you want?
Libby's mood had obviously not improved. Hello, Miss, Libby. No luck here. The dinner is just for some ball players from Cleveland. Any calls while I've been out?
Yes, Dirk. Donald called with another lead for you. By the way, where have you been?
The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in downtown KC. I got to meet the president, Mr. Kendrick.
Oh, Bob. Oh, yeah, he's a great guy.
This time it was my turn to be silent on the phone.
Dirk, are you still there?
Yes, Bob? You're on a first-name basis with the head of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum?
Sure. Anyone who meets him is, or should be.
Amazing. The next thing you're going to tell me is you're on a first-name basis with the mayor of Kansas City and Princess Anne of England.
Well, probably not.
Good.
Because I don't know which mayor you mean. Kay or Sly or Quentin. They're all neat people.
I can't believe this. Well, at least Princess Anne.
Dirk, you did know I spent my senior year at the London School of Economics.
Oh, forget it. I don't want to hear about it. Are there any messages for me or new leads?
Well, I followed up on a couple. No one is having a Palmer Raids revel.
What were they? I asked, feeling ever more isolated and ignorant.
A series of police raids aimed at finding communists.
Really? I asked, stifling a yawn, only slightly exaggerated for effect.
Okay, if you are going to be that way, I'll just run down the list. Antwerp Olympics, the first time the Olympic flag was unveiled, no flag festival. Irish Revolution, Bloody Sunday. No plans to drown sorrow with a Guinness. And there's no League of Nations lunch of note at the International Relations Council.
League of Nations?
Yes, the first attempt at United Nations. Odd thing was, it was an American idea, but we never joined it.
It doesn't seem that odd the way we act today.
Oh, speaking of which, there is no Spanish flu pandemic party or Wall Street bomb bash either.
I guess that wouldn't be very appropriate. Wait, Wall Street bomb?
Yes. September 1920, 38 people killed. People thought that anarchists were trying to kill J.P. Morgan. They never found out who did it. Oh, and that brings me to Donald's idea. He thought he knew where the Bradleys may have been going. He said he'd give you a clue.
Not for the first time did I wish that Donald's games were limited to Candyland and Monopoly.
Are you ready? He told me to ask you, have you got your copy of the U.S. Constitution handy?
No, duh.
Well, as always, Dirk, I do. I'll go get it.
I fumbled with the patches from the other city's teams while I waited. Something about them reminded me of...
Okay, I've got it.
Good. Now, what did Donald say next?
He said to look at the amendments.
Of course. Were there any ratified in 1920? I heard the rustling of pages over the phone.
Yes, Dirk. The 19th Amendment was ratified in August of 1920.
And what does the 19th do?
It gave women the right to vote.
So we need to find a commemoration of that event. And I bet we will find the Bradleys there. Quick, look to see if there are any dinners or events celebrating the 19th Amendment. I'm headed back to the office now. We're going to solve this mystery yet.
Stay tuned for part 3 of The Mystery of the Missing Parents, right after this public service announcement.
Sometimes it is the smallest thing that can make the difference in someone's life. Out there, even now at this moment, a struggling writer is sitting at a keyboard, staring at a promising script. She pauses, frozen in fear, unable to move past the end of the sentence in front of her. She is facing one of the major linguistic crises of her time, and she is lost, afraid, abandoned by grammaticians and journalists alike. Yes, she remains one of the many adherents of the double space at the end of a sentence rule. Yes, those who are over 40 are left rudderless by the modern assault on a decent pause in between thoughts. They have been urged by revisionists and taxians who torment them with statements like, For the love of all that is good and holy in this world, stop doing this. Even if you do even a little bit of research on this topic, you'll find plenty of articles practically begging you to stop using two spaces. Slate's Farhad Manji went so far as to say that it is totally, completely, utterly, and inarguably wrong. Yet, these isolated individuals persist. They look at pages and see sentences, if complete sentences are even used anymore, crammed up against each other. No sense of pause or a thoughtful moment of reflection in between. No, they see everything singularly spaced. So you might as well read, "It was a dark and stormy night, the wind was howling, the old house creaked as the governess looked in horror." No, the real horror is the loss of rhythm and beautiful tempo in the visual presentation of English. Imagine if Shakespeare had not inserted extra spaces where he wanted actors to pause or move. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler, no, there is nothing noble about the monospatial conspiracy that has taken over printing and publishing today. Look into the eyes of these poor lost authors and essayists. They are abused and misused, left out in the cold, beset by the shifting icy winds coming from the ivory towers of academia. But there is something you can do about this looming tragedy. For just $13 a month, you can equip a writer's computer with a situational transitions automatic manipulation program, or better known as STAMP. The simple piece of software senses the user's intention and automatically inserts a double space after each sentence. Even better, the program then releases a virus that searches out other computers and alters their word programs so that they too insert the desired double space into their work. Imagine a world where the users of this marvelous invention will never again have to face ridicule or criticism for their choices in punctuation, their beautifully spaced literary creations. At last, without even realizing that they have been converted, everyone will be double spacing in a blissful state of ignorance. And you, yes you, will have been the person who made this brilliant and meaningful transition take place. Please, won't you give today? These tired, poor, huddled masses of sentences, yearning to breathe free, cannot wait any longer. The linguistic barbarians are at our gates, and the syntax wolves are howling in the snow-covered woods outside our increasingly vulnerable language cabins. They need your support, your help, your contribution to make a world safe for the lovely double-tap keystroke of freedom.
And now, we return you to part 3 of The Mystery of the Missing Parents, An Unexpected Discovery.
As I sauntered into the office, I set an iced vanilla chai on her desk and said, "Libby, before you say anything else, like thanks for remembering the iced chai, I just want you to know there's no need to shower me with effusive praise. It was just some basic deductive activity. I don't mean to brag, but..." I looked at her face. This was not a look of a victorious investigations associate.
Dirk, it doesn't work.
Libby's voice brought me crashing back to earth.
I just checked the community calendar. All the celebrations for the 19th Amendment were back in August.
My shoulders slumped faster than an ice cream cone in a California wildfire. Thanks a lot, Donald.
I'm sorry. It was a nice try, though.
I dejectedly tossed the bag of patches onto her desk.
What are these?
Patches from Negro League baseball teams in a bunch of cities. She dumped out the bag and looked at the patches.
Dirk, there's something about...
But I had already started trudging toward my desk. Libby stood up and followed me. She walked over to the bar and poured me a drink.
I think you're going to need this. Myra Bradley called asking about progress. She wants you to call her back.
Great. Well, I guess it's time to admit defeat. I'll have to face the music.
Oh, but Dirk, if you learn from defeat, you haven't really lost.
Sorry, Libby, but this case beat me. I've been browbeat, beaten to a pulp, and just plain old beat. I was turned every which way but loose, hoist on my own petard and knocked for a loop. They met me in St. Louis, raced over me in Indianapolis, smashed my derby in Kentucky, WKRP'd me in Cincinnati, and burned me like the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland.
Wait just a second, Dirk. That's it. I think I know where they are. Where's the postcard?
She ran back to her desk and picked up the patches. She rushed back and grabbed the postcard from me. I wasn't listening. Nothing was going to rob me of my moment of complete misery. I was divided and conquered, and was the victim of a crushing defeat. Great Burnham Wood to high Dunsinane Hill has come against me. Blow, wind, come rack, at least we'll die with harness on our back.
Dirk, somehow you have intuitively hit upon it. These patches correspond to the cities named on the postcard.
My horse, my kingdom for a horse. She slapped me smartly 3 times, and then threw the gin in my face for good measure. Oh, what a world, what a world! I'm melting, melting, melting. I froze a few inches above the floor and looked up into her very disapproving face.
Now you're just being melodramatic. Snap out of it. I know where they've gone.
What? How? Where are they?
They've gone to one of these 6 cities. And you figured it out without even realizing that, well, you'd figured it out. You selected only the patches that corresponded to the names on the card.
What do you know? I solved the case.
Well, no, but you did lead us to an important clue.
What do you know? I led us to an important clue.
Of course you didn't realize it. They were right here in front of you, but I had to make the connection.
What do you know? I'm a complete idiot.
Dirk, stop. Now all we have to do is find a Centennial celebration in one of the cities on the list.
We sprang into action. My compact was still loading Netscape, so we turned to Libby's Dell. In lightning fast succession, we considered the candidates. I ticked off the cities. Cincinnati.
Isn't that called the Queen City?
Yeah, and a city of 7 hills. Have you ever tried to drive there?
Difficult?
Don't get me started. I'd wind up on top of one hill and look over and see where I wanted to go on top of another.
And Dirk, you just have no sense of direction. I bet the local citizens could have guided you there.
They tried, but at least I was able to find Skyline Chili and Grater's Ice Cream.
Good?
The best.
Hey, it says the Reds were world champions. Oh, that was the 1919 team. They finished 3rd in 1920.
Okay, let's see. Further down, a downtown building boom began in 1920. I don't see anything else about 1920.
Okay, next town on the list, Cleveland.
Hey, look there. Cleveland actually did win the World Series that year.
Baseball is becoming a definite threat in this investigation. The Bradleys aren't fans by chance.
Myra didn't say, but why mention all the friends in other cities on the list? They wouldn't come to Cleveland just to celebrate the World Series.
Census that year revealed that Cleveland was the 5th largest city in the U.S. Oh, and it says Harry Davis resigned as mayor in 1920.
I still don't see anything here. Next place.
And we go west to Indianapolis.
Nice town. Ever had one of the steaks at St. Elmo's?
No.
It's worth taking out a second mortgage on your home. And that's about what you'll have to do there, too. Great food. Great big price.
Hey, what about the Indy 500? Let's see. There. It was won by Chevrolet.
The car?
No, the driver, Gaston Chevrolet.
Hey, this is great. Indianapolis was founded in 1820. They're celebrating their bicentennial.
Congrats to Indy, but the postcard specifically said the 100th anniversary. Is there anything big that happened in 1920?
Booth Tarkington lived there while writing his novels.
What is it with you and these nobody authors?
Again, with the nobody stuff. I'll have you know that Tarkington won the Pulitzer for fiction. twice. And Agatha Christie wrote 88 novels and has the record for the most successful, longest-running play in theatrical history. And Bradbury...
Yeah, neat stuff. But I still don't think any of it is a reason for the Bradleys to go to Indianapolis. Onward.
Kentucky. Not a city. I wonder why they listed the whole state.
Well, that opens a lot more possibilities for commemorations. What do we have?
Well, the Kentucky Derby was won by a horse named Paul Jones. Oh, but then he lost to Man o' War in the Preakness and Belmont Stakes. That's a pretty famous name.
Again, not a reason to bring people from all these cities to celebrate.
Hey, wait, what about the presidential election that year?
Warren Harding from Ohio won and beat, let's see, there's a name lost in history, James Cox. Oh, guess who his vice presidential running mate was?
Colonel Sanders. Hey, you said guess.
No, Franklin Roosevelt. Oh, but Kentucky voted for Cox, so they were on the losing side.
Well, it's 100 years since Harding was elected. Would there be a celebration in one of the Ohio towns that we missed?
But why would the Bradleys go from out here? Oh, and take a look at the Harding administration. Lots of scandals. Not a good record to celebrate.
And what does that remind me of? Never mind. Okay, final name on the card. St. Louis.
Well, a big thriving city in 1920, but nothing is really happening specifically in 1920. They were expanding and improving the St. Louis Zoo. That's a cool place.
One of the last free zoos, and really has been upgraded the last few years. Oh, look here. It was the second season of the Muni.
What's the Muni?
Municipal Opera. It actually is a big outdoor musical theater venue. Hey, did you know that they reserve about 1,500 free seats for anyone to sit in at each performance?
How do you know all this?
Well, I grew up in St. Louis.
And if I say 1985?
That jerk of an umpire cost us the series.
Oh, as a native Kansas Cityan, I couldn't pass that up. Okay, well, that's it. We've exhausted all the possible cities and nothing jumps out at us.
I knew it. I'm doomed. I'll have to call Myra Bradley and admit defeat.
I don't get it, Dirk. Something ties this all together. Let's review. What is it that creates this union?
Well, we were speaking with Myra, and she really liked all the jokes that made fun of English teachers.
No, that doesn't give me enough information. Keep talking.
So we called McTavish, who was very proud of being a Scot rather than English, and I was speaking to him about all the catering gigs he has. I wonder if he has to pay union scale.
Still nothing.
Okay, I was looking for the union of ideas by going to the Negro Leagues Museum, where I ended up speaking with Mr. Kendrick.
Bob.
Bob, and he has a great command of English when he tells his stories.
And then?
And then I lost it. I started ranting like an over-the-top English-speaking actor who's probably a member of a union and just went crazy.
Right. And then we looked at the card with all the cities on it.
I know. We are so close. It's like I just about get to it, and then it's so absurd that I don't see what's just in front of my eyes or hear what is just being said for my ears to hear. I mean, I feel like I'm telling one of those English jokes again while speaking at a college union. If only we could have figured out the clues on that card.
Wait a second, Dirk.
She picked up the card as I suddenly decided to put narration back in the story again. She flipped it over.
That's it! Eureka!
Eureka? They went to the little town of Eureka over by St. Louis?
No, silly. The front of the card. We never looked at it. It has a picture of Dartmouth House. Let's call Myra right away.
I was still a little baffled, but something about that name rang a bell or buzzed a buzzer or something. Oh, enough of these English-speaking games running through the union of my mind. I still couldn't figure it out. I got Myra on the phone and put it on speaker mode. Myra, Libby thinks we have figured out where your parents are.
Yes, Myra, when we started making the jokes about literary devices, you joined right in, didn't you?
Oh, sure. We always had fun with those at home. Like this one. The bar was walked into by the passive voice. We always enjoyed a good laugh at that one, I can tell you.
Yes, that is wonderful, Myra. But what I want to ask is, where did you learn the appreciation of those jokes?
Well, from my parents.
And where did they pick up all those jokes?
Oh, I don't know. They always seem to come home with more of them after their meetings.
Myra, what were those meetings?
It suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks, which I suddenly realized was a perfectly acceptable simile for the situation.
Why, Libby, they went to meetings of the English-speaking union.
And that is where your parents have gone. They are in New York to celebrate the founding of the English-speaking union in the United States, which just happened to be in 1920.
Of course that's what they meant. But how did you figure it out?
Well, the picture side of the postcard has Dartmouth House on the front,
Yes.
and a quote from Sir Evelyn Wrench on the back.
And?
Wrench was the founder of the English-speaking union, and Dartmouth House is the world headquarters in London.
And suddenly I chipped in the rest. And a group of Americans working with Wrench brought the organization to the United States in 1920. Libby looked at me in astonishment.
And it just so happens that the Kansas City branch began in the same year.
My jaw dropped like a lead balloon. Simile. And my great-great-great-great-great-uncle, Lieutenant Colonel Marvin Gates, was the founder. Libby's eyebrows raised like Lazarus rising from the dead. Illusion.
And my great-great-great-grandfather, Lieutenant Colonel Marvin Gates, was also the founder.
We regarded each other until it became uncomfortable for our jaws and eyebrows to maintain their dropped and raised status, and Myra's voice kept saying,
Libby, Mr. Brickhouse. Hello? Are you there?
Libby quickly restored her eyebrows to their regular position.
Myra, call the New York office of the English-speaking union. They have some great things going on for the anniversary, including an appearance by Princess Anne. Most of it's virtual, but a small cozy group is assembling there. Your parents were very lucky to be invited to join them. So I'm sure that's where you'll find them.
But wait, I don't need to. They just walked in the door. What's that, Mumsy? You hadn't realized the event was now almost all virtual. So you just came back home. And now you are just going to join other members online. Libby, now they're saying something about some kind of silly mystery play being performed. But thank you for all the work you've put in figuring out the mystery.
And as soon as my jaw had been reeled in from the floor, I added, and expect the invoice for the rest of the payment of our fee to show up on your phone tonight.
Oh, thank you.
This thank you was noticeably less enthusiastic, but Myra's voice quickly recovered its excitement.
Yes, thank you. Because you solved the case so quickly, I'm going to add a generous bonus. Oh, wait, just a second. Momsy and Popsy say they'll contribute too for all the trouble they've caused.
She hung up. Libby and I still were staring at each other. She picked up the postcard from the Bradleys from my desk and read it aloud.
We should have seen it right away. Listen. Dearest Myra, we are attending a most glorious celebration. How perfectly marvelous it is to be able to mark this 100th anniversary. We are so looking forward to seeing our friends from Cincinnati, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Kentucky, and St. Louis. Mumsy and Popsy. Don't you see, Dirk? They love the English language, everything they write and say they do with a flourish.
Of course. But what I can't get over is the coincidence that we were both related to the founder of the Kansas City branch.
Dirk, you're right. We have this connection through the English-speaking union and never realized it. We could have enjoyed so much more time together attending their lectures and working in the English in Action program at the Kansas City Public Library.
Actually, Libby, to add to the almost unbelievable series of coincidences, my mother is a teacher, and she truly has enjoyed an ESU program, the T-Lab, although it was called BUS when she went. She got to study Shakespeare in England. When she came home, she gave me a chance to learn about his works. Those lines I quoted are some of my favorites.
How ironic that is, Dirk. My younger sister actually competed in the ESU Shakespeare competition at her school last year.
And did she win?
No, she took last place. But even so, it is just another part of this amazing, unexpected, and completely Oxford comma-free denouement.
Yes, I see what you mean, Libby. Right here, the ESU has lived up to its goal of bringing people together to make a better world through the English language.
I think their mission statement says it a little differently.
Oh, that's not the point. Libby, the English-speaking union has saved Brickhouse and Associates. In fact, if I may be so bold, Miss Stackwell.
Please, Mr. Brickhouse, you have my permission to be so bold.
I think we may need to change the name of this establishment to something that more accurately reflects the new reality unfolding here. I completely ignored the nearby mirror.
And what might the newly minted name be, good sir?
How would you feel about Brickhouse and Family? From her radiant smile, I could tell she approved. I stared admiringly at her. And for the first time, I was looking directly into her eyes.
This concludes tonight's performance in celebration of the ESU Centennial. Tonight's play was brought to you by WESU and the Region 6 branches. A special thank you to our Region 6 presidents, Suzanne Schweller, Bill Kennedy, Mary Patricia Warneke, Dan Bukovic, Kate Nitskin, and Barbara Lewington. The Case of the Missing Parents featured the acting talents of John Specht, Emily Davenport, Nikki Stanley, and Ben Martin. The play was written and directed by Ben Martin. And this play and live stream event was produced by Ashley Smithson of Simply Smashing Productions and Nick Parker and the Fredcast Podcast Network. Thank you and good night.
Well, this concludes our radio play mystery comedy. We would like to thank all of our actors. And Nick, let's introduce our actors.
All right. Well, thanks, Jeff. Hey, we appreciate you inviting us to come perform for you. This was a fun project, and as an old newspaper writer guy, I loved all the wordplay in that one. My name's Nick Parker. I'm with Fredcast Podcast Network, and I served as the producer for this show that was written and directed by my buddy Ben Martin. And we have with us two of the other actors, Emily Davenport and Nikki Stanley. Our fourth actor who played Dirk Brickhouse was unable to be with us tonight. He had a death in the family, so we're not going to get to talk to him. Emily played the role of Libby Stackwell. Nikki played the role of Myra Bradley, as well as our Lily Tomlin-inspired librarian. I hope everybody caught that one because it made me chuckle every single time we rehearsed. And then Ben Martin played the role of McTavish, and he was also the writer and the director of this. Ben, I want to start out with a little bit of a question for you. I think it's interesting. You are actually an ESU member. So when we got onto this project, you dove right in. What was it like to turn a script around this quickly? Well, we lost Ben's audio. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna come back to Ben. Emily, Nikki, lucky that this is the second time we've been able to do a show like this. You guys are veteran theater performers, but you're veterans on the stage. What's it like to do a couple now that are just audio acting?
It's a whole different world. I feel like I can almost, I don't know that I'm not going to say it's easier because it's not. It's just different. And to just focus on the words and the vocalization and interpreting the words into the character, just to listen is different because a lot of my acting, as you can see, I talk with my hands, is portrayed in my movements and my facial expressions. And so just to be able to do that with your voice, it's a whole different world. It's very different.
Nikki, you will claim to be the method actor. So is it hard for you to dive into a role like this?
Well, it wasn't necessarily hard, but so much of what actors do is feed off of the energy of their cast, and so then when you're in a room that's essentially quiet and you've kind of got that bit of delay, coming up with new timing, new ways to feed off of each other is kind of interesting. I mean, it was also kind of nice to mute my mic and sit back and be an audience member. You don't get that luxury on stage. You have to kind of stay in the moment. So to just enjoy my fellow thespians,
Well,
with my ears was fun.
I'll give everybody a little bit of behind the scenes look here. So because we had on this performance, we dealt with a COVID exposure. We had dealt with one of our actors had a death in the family. So we never even got to record in the same room. We did all of this over video calls and recordings. Have you done a play before where you've never been able to see the people you're acting from?
No, I mean,
no. I've done some voiceover work in the past, and you just kind of throw it out there and hope it resonates with somebody. And on a similar note, it's been interesting as an educator teaching. You don't know if people are nodding or being receptive, and so much of what we do is feed off of the audience's energy as well. And so it's been interesting going, well, I hope this hits. I hope this sticks with somebody. And you kind of don't know. So that's been an interesting angle at this whole thing too, not knowing how it resonates. So hopefully it has.
Donna Miller throws in a question. She wants to know who was the Foley artist. Ben, do you or I take the blame for that?
There were real tissues involved. I will tell you that much.
It was a mix of some sound effects that we found and we purchased for the show, as well as some extreme nose blowing from Nikki Stanley.
Right, and Emily with the slap.
And Emily may or may not have used one of her children to create the slapping sound. I don't know. Allegedly. Ben, if you're back and audio is working now, I kind of want to throw a similar question to you, because you were a theater teacher. You've been a writer, a director, and an actor for a long time. But I'm curious. That's what right. It's like for you to try to control and give direction when no one's standing on a stage and we're all sitting on a couch, an office desk, a table in the kitchen. The last time we did this, we actually had somebody who sat in the kitchen to record her lines. How did you have to adjust for this?
Right. Yeah, there's that separation. There is that separation that makes it more difficult. And trying to communicate what I'd like to have the actor do is a little more difficult because we're just pictures on a screen, and yeah, I talk with my hands too, and so it's trying to get everybody across to everybody.
Well, and we, you and I kind of even would since we had to put this together as a pre-recorded thing, I would make edits and then send it to you and let you listen and then send me back notes. So there was a lot of back and forth to this one.
Right. Right.
Nikki and Emily, do you guys want to keep doing things like this?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's the most comfortable costume I've ever had. You know, kind of come as you are. That's been convenient.
It has. And I was so hungry to be able to do anything theater related that, yes, absolutely. This gives me at least some way to perform. So absolutely. It was neat. It was a cool experience.
I second that for sure.
Well, here's a question, and I really just want to know who's on my side. I'm going to ask specifically from a section of the play, and this was the public service announcement in between segments 2 and 3. Am I the only one here that's anti-Oxford comma?
No, not at all. Sorry, but I am too. I've eliminated it and the double space.
That was the point.
Still my heart. Ben, that was painful for me to hear that part.
The double space has to stay. That's all there is to it.
What are the audience members saying? I don't know if I'm seeing any of their comments, but do we have any audience members weighing in on that?
I think that's a good question for the audience. I want to know your stance on the double space and the Oxford comma, and there is a right answer.
That's right. It seems like this would be price for admission right here. You know, like must have an opinion on the Oxford comma.
Sure.
Definitely.
Some real divisive issues here.
Well, we will stay on for just a little bit longer. If anybody has any questions, again, a big thank you to English Speaking Union for asking us to come perform. This was a fun script to take on. This was a fun project to be a part of, and I got to learn something new about. I knew nothing of the English Speaking Union. So Ben, you and Jeff have introduced us to something new, and it's been exciting. Ben, one of the things mentioned in the play was about a program where you go to England. You actually got to take part in this, right? I think he is muted.
Right. Yeah. The way I got involved with the English Speaking Union in the first place was getting to do one of the bus summer sessions in and studied at the center. I went to a class called Teaching Shakespeare Through Performance, which was just brilliant and gave me a whole new look into how I get my student more excited and more involved in Shakespeare.
Well, you're retired now, so this is really going to be more for Nikki, who is still teaching. What else has this done for you as you look to kind of try to prepare students for all different types of not just roles but avenues in the theater world?
Right, that's a good question. With my colleagues, this summer, kind of having a little heads up, knowing, what terrain we could possibly be heading into. We were trying to think of other ways that we could allow kids the ability to perform and use their voice in creative ways. And, luckily I had done, this other radio program, the other one with some of you. And, it was kind of nice having that experience going, it can be done. There's other ways that we can convene, in an active arts. And so we're going to try to do some, creative angles for kids to have some opportunities to perform. it's out there. You just have to be creative.
Donna
Ben.
Miller's going to chime in on our Oxford comma debate,
Okay.
and she's using this like logic and reason thing that whatever. But she says the Oxford comma is useful to discover the age of the writer. The older you are, the more likely you are to use it. Well, that's true, and it makes sense.
It's fair.
And
does.
it's fair. I still don't like it. But again, that's me. I'm an old newspaper guy, so the less space you take up in print, the better.
Mhm.
And
as
see,
we-
I learned from a newspaper guy, and when I do communications for work, and I learned from a
So I
newspaper guy,
actually
so
had-
that's why.
I actually had an English teacher named Mrs. Davis who marked my paper up with lots of red marks. And I had to use the Oxford comma with her, but to get rid of it ever since.
Well, as we wrap up and before we sign off, I want to do a little cross promotion for you all. You are all part of a local theater group in the Kansas City area called Summit Theater Group. This is the second audio play that you have done, and if anybody wants to go see it, you can hit up any of your favorite podcast apps and look up Summit Theater Group, and you can see hear another original play by Ben Martin called A Candle in the Dark. Did I get that right? I always got your title wrong.
Against.
No, I want to sing.
So close.
I want to sing Elton John every time. A Candle Against the Dark. Ben, that was another great play. It talks about a family's battle against polio, which is a huge, I think, parallel to all of the things we're going through now. So if people want to check that one out, they can. Once again, we'll say a big thank you to Jeff from English Speaking Union and all of you for inviting us to perform. We thank you, and good night.